The night air was thick with an unsettling quiet, punctuated only by the distant murmur of voices and the occasional sharp crack of shattered glass. I held Eli close, feeling the rapid beat of his small heart against my chest, a fragile reminder of everything I was fighting for. The blackout had stretched on longer than anyone dared hope, and now the walls of Edenview felt more like a cage than a home. In the dim, flickering light of our kitchen, every shadow seemed to loom larger, every silence heavier. Eli's wide eyes searched mine for reassurance I wasn't sure I could give. "Dad, will the lights come back soon?" he whispered, his voice trembling with a mixture of fear and hope. I swallowed the lump in my throat and forced a calm smile. "We're going to make sure they do, Eli, I promise." But promises felt brittle in a place where control was slipping through our fingers like smoke. The scripted behavior of our neighbors had fractured into chaos, and the enforcers, cold, unyielding, were tightening their grip. Lucas, the man who embodied that merciless order, had made it clear that they wanted me, and they would stop at nothing to get what they wanted. Earlier that evening, Jenna and I had met in hushed tones beneath the skeletal remains of what once was the community center's grand lobby. The room still smelled faintly of burnt circuits and stale fear. She had laid out the plan, while some of the group worked on disabling the remaining control nodes. I would draw the enforcers' attention away, sacrificing myself to give them the window they needed. "Mark, it's dangerous," Jenna had said, her eyes reflecting the wavering candlelight and a fierce determination. "But if anyone can do it, it's you. Eli needs you, but right now he needs you to be brave for all of us." I nodded, the weight of her words settling in my chest like a stone. I thought of Eli's face, the way his small hands clung to mine when the world felt uncertain. My heart ached, but there was no turning back now. The confrontation came with the first light of dawn. I stood at the community center's gate, the heavy metal cold against my palms, waiting. Lucas approached, flanked by two silent enforcers, his expression unreadable but his eyes sharp and unyielding. "Mark," Lucas said, his voice low and authoritative, "surrender yourself, and we can ensure your son's safety. Resist, and you risk everything." There was a pause. The world felt suspended in that moment. I looked past him, toward the shadows where Jenna and the others waited, ready to act once I was taken. The sacrifice was clear. The choice was mine. "I surrender," I said, my voice steady despite the storm raging inside me. The enforcers moved swiftly, binding my hands with cold restraints that bit into my skin. Eli's small fingers brushed my cheek, his eyes shimmering with unshed tears. "Be careful, Dad," he whispered. A surge of fierce love and desperate hope flooded me. "I will," I promised. As they led me away, the first pale rays of sunlight spilled over Edenview's gates, casting long shadows that stretched like fingers reaching for freedom. In that fragile light, I held on to one truth, that sacrifice, however costly, was the spark that might ignite our salvation. But as the gates closed behind me, I couldn't shake the gnawing question, was this the beginning of our rescue, or the prelude to a deeper darkness? And in that uncertainty, the fight for Edenview's soul surged onward. The acrid scent of smoke filled the air, mingling with the harsh shouts and clattering of overturned furniture in the community center. Shadows flickered across the cracked walls as the last remnants of Edenview's fragile peace shattered in a violent crescendo. Mark's heart pounded fiercely in his chest, every sense tuned to the chaos swirling around him. His gaze locked with Marcus's, a man whose very presence seemed to harden the room into a battleground. "This ends now," Marcus growled, stepping forward, muscles coiled like a predator ready to strike. his scarred face twisted in a sneer, eyes blazing with the ruthless hunger for control. Around them, voices rose in anger and fear, neighbors divided into factions that once were friends. The community's collapse had become a war, fought not with armies but with fists, weapons, and desperate wills. Mark tightened his grip on Leela's small hand, feeling the tremble beneath his own. His son's wide eyes searched his face for assurance, for safety. He knelt down, voice low and steady despite the turmoil. "Stay close to me, kiddo. We'll get through this." Leela nodded, clutching his father's jacket with all the innocence and bravery a child could muster. The sound of a gunshot cracked through the air, sharp and terrifying, followed by a chorus of screams. The room erupted into chaos once more. Evelyn moved swiftly through the crowd, her sharp eyes scanning for threats. She confronted Derek, whose cold gaze betrayed no hesitation. "Put the gun down, Derek. This isn't the way," she urged, voice firm but pleading. Derek's hand hovered near his concealed weapon, his expression unreadable but charged with menace. For a tense moment, the world seemed to hold its breath. The standoff broke with a sudden surge of movement. Fists flew, shouts turned to cries, and Mark found himself at the heart of the storm. His instincts screamed to protect Lila, to shield him from the violence consuming their home. Blood splattered across the floor as punches landed and bodies collided. The lines between friend and foe blurred in the desperation to survive. Amid the turmoil, Mark's mind raced. Every choice carried weight, every action a risk. Could he maintain his humanity in a place where order was a memory and trust a fleeting illusion? The collapse of Edenview's system had unleashed more than just darkness. It had exposed the raw, savage instinct beneath the surface. When the dust finally settled, the community center was a ruin of splintered wood and shattered glass. Mark stood bloodied but unbroken, the weight of exhaustion and determination etched on his face. Around him, neighbors nursed wounds both physical and emotional, their eyes reflecting the hard truth. Edenview's old order was gone. Yet, in the midst of the destruction, a flicker of something else endured. A fierce resolve to fight back, to reclaim their lives from the shadows of control and chaos. Mark looked down at Lila, whose small hand still gripped his. In that moment, the future felt uncertain but no less hopeful. "We keep moving," Mark whispered, voice rough but unwavering. "No matter what comes next." Outside, the night stretched endlessly, but inside, a new battle had begun, one for the soul of Edenview, and for the fragile spark of freedom that still burned within its walls. The breaking point had arrived, and with it, the fight for survival, for control, and for the future of everyone trapped inside the gates. The echoes of violence faded into a heavy silence, broken only by the ragged breaths of those left standing, survivors who would face whatever came next, together or apart. Mark knew this was far from over, but for the first time in weeks, he felt a fierce glimmer of clarity. The script was broken. Now it was time to write their own story. As shadows deepened and the first hints of dawn touched the horizon, Mark's eyes burned with determination. Edenview's nightmare was far from finished, but so was their fight. And this time, they would not go quietly into the darkness. "Hold on," he murmured, voice barely audible but filled with promise. "We're just getting started." And somewhere deep inside, that was enough to keep going. The night air was thick with tension as we approached the central hub, the heart of Edenview's sinister control network. Shadowed by the faint glow of emergency lights, the building loomed like a silent sentinel, its dark windows reflecting the flickering remnants of a once brilliant digital world. Every step I took alongside Lena and Jared felt heavier, weighed down by the knowledge that if this assault failed, the nightmare we lived in would continue indefinitely. Eli clung to my side, his small hand wrapped tightly around mine. His wide eyes scanned the fortress-like structure, blending curiosity with a spark of bravery that belied his age. I could feel his pulse against my palm, steady but quickening. This was more than a mission. It was a fight for his future. Inside, the air was stale and cold, tinged with the metallic scent of machinery struggling against shutdown. The faint hum of power thrummed beneath the floorboards, a reminder that Edenview systems were still alive, still fighting back. Lena led the way, her portable terminal flickering as she connected to the hub's network. Her fingers danced over the keys with practiced urgency, each stroke a battle against the complex digital defenses designed to keep us out. "Almost there," she muttered, sweat beading on her brow. The emergency alarms began to wail intermittently, echoing down the sterile corridors. The red warning lights cast long, jittering shadows, making the walls seem alive with menace. Jared moved ahead, his imposing figure a shield against the unknown. When the automated defense drones swarmed out of the vents, their metallic bodies glinting ominously, Jared didn't hesitate. He met them head-on, his fists and makeshift weapons clashing with cold steel. The sounds of combat grunts, clangs, and the mechanical whir of drones filled the air, a chaotic symphony underscoring our desperate mission. From my position near the control core, I held Eli close, whispering reassurances I hoped he could believe. The core's screens flickered wildly, shifting from cold blue to urgent red warnings. Every second felt like a lifetime as Lena fought the last firewall, her voice strained but resolute. "Got it?" she finally exclaimed, the terminal emitting a sharp beep. The digital chains binding Edenview's residents began to unravel. The smart systems powering our captivity started to collapse, their grip loosening. Relief washed over me, but it was tempered by the knowledge that freedom meant uncertainty. The order we had known was gone, replaced by a raw, uncharted reality. As the hub powered down, the silence that followed was profound. A moment suspended between the end of control and the beginning of true autonomy. Eli looked up at me, hope shining in his eyes. "Dad, is it over?" I smiled, pulling him close. "It's just the beginning." Outside, Edenview's gates would soon open, but the real challenge lay ahead, rebuilding trust, reclaiming freedom, and facing whatever shadows remained. Tonight, we won the battle for control. Tomorrow, we'd fight for our future. The last firewall had fallen, but our story was far from over. The darkness was absolute. Mark sat on the edge of the couch, the only light in the room coming from a small candle flickering in the corner. Outside, the usual hum of the Edenview smart systems was gone, replaced by an eerie silence that seemed to press in from all sides. His son, Eli, curled up beside him, clutching his worn stuffed rabbit, eyes wide but trusting. The blackout had deepened beyond anything Mark had feared. The entire community's systems had shut down. Not just the power, but every last node of control. Edenview was plunged into raw, unmediated darkness. Mark's mind raced as he tried to piece together the consequences. The gates were locked tight, the cameras offline, and even the emergency protocols had been rendered useless. The scripted behaviors that had gripped the neighborhood earlier now dissolved into confusion and panic. Without the smart infrastructure dictating movements and conversation, people were left to their own devices, and that was terrifying. He could hear distant voices, raised in fear or anger, but here in their home, the silence felt like a fragile cocoon. Eli shifted closer, his small hand gripping Mark's. "Dad, what's going to happen?" he whispered, voice trembling. Mark swallowed, searching for the words that would steady them both. "We'll get through this, Eli. We're still here, and we'll figure it out." Outside, the streetlights were dead, and the neon signs that once bathed the community in a vaporwave glow were darkened relics. Mark remembered the strange beauty of those lights, their pastel hues now replaced by the stark blackness of night. He had always trusted the systems, the invisible hands that managed Edenview's every detail. Now, it was just people, raw and unpredictable. Jenna appeared at the door, her face pale but resolute. "Mark, we need to talk. The others are gathering in the square. They don't know what to do." Mark nodded, standing up and grabbing a flashlight. The beam cut through the darkness as he stepped outside, Eli close behind. The streets were filled with silhouettes moving uncertainly, some clutching phones useless without signal, others staring blankly into the void. He spotted Derek, the community's unofficial enforcer, standing rigidly near the entrance to the central hub. His cold eyes scanned the crowd, a silent reminder of the order that had collapsed. Jenna approached Derek, her voice low but firm. "We can't keep living like this. The control is gone. We have to find a new way." Derek's jaw tightened. Without the systems, this place falls apart. People fall apart. Tension crackled between them like static electricity, the unspoken question hanging in the air: who would take control now? Mark moved through the crowd, sensing the raw human emotions bubbling beneath the surface: fear, anger, hope, and desperation. The blackout had stripped away the veneer of civilization Edenview had relied on, revealing something more primal and uncertain. He thought of Eli, of the future he wanted to protect. The boy's innocence was a beacon in the darkness, a reminder that beyond the systems and scripts, humanity endured. As the night deepened, the community struggled to find footing in this new world. Some sought to rebuild order, others to seize power, and a few simply to survive. Mark returned home, holding Eli close as the first faint colors of dawn began to bleed into the sky. The darkness was receding, but the challenges ahead were greater than ever. "We're not alone," Mark whispered, the promise hanging between them like a fragile lifeline. "We'll find a way." Outside, Edenview stood silent, caught in the uneasy balance between collapse and rebirth, a community forced to confront its true self in the darkness before the dawn. The sun dipped low, the sky bleeding into hues of violet and pink that stretched across the horizon like a fragile promise. Standing by the cracked fountain in the heart of Edenview, I let the silence settle around me, broken only by the distant hum of voices and the rustle of dry leaves skittering across cracked pavement. The fountain, once the gleaming centerpiece of this gated paradise, was now a skeleton of its former self, tiles broken, the water long gone, replaced by dust and the faint smell of earth reclaiming its territory. I knelt beside the edge, fingers tracing the jagged cracks, feeling the roughness beneath my skin. So much had been lost, not just the power or the control systems, but the very soul of this place. Edenview had promised us safety, order, a future bathed in convenience and technology. Instead, it had delivered us into a nightmare of surveillance and manipulation, a script we were forced to follow without knowing who was pulling the strings. Yet, as darkness crept over the community, I realized something else was stirring, a resilience that no blackout nor puppet master could extinguish. The neighbors I'd watched fall into trance-like routines were beginning to stir, their eyes clearing, their voices breaking free from rehearsed lines. It was fragile, uneven, but unmistakable, the first flickers of genuine humanity. My son Eli burst through my reverie, his small hands clutching a wildflower, its petals vibrant against the dull backdrop of broken concrete. His smile was a beacon in the dimming light, a reminder that innocence still thrived here. "Look, Dad," he said, holding the flower up like a treasure. "It's still alive." I smiled, the weight on my chest easing for a moment. "Yes, buddy," I said softly. "It is." Joanna and Raphael approached from the street, their faces lit by the flickering neon of a billboard that had somehow come back to life, casting vaporwave hues of pink and turquoise across their determined expressions. They were talking quietly, voices low but charged with purpose. I caught fragments of their conversation. Plans for rebuilding, organizing, protecting what was left. "Mark," Joanna called gently, "we're starting to pull people together. This can't be the end. Not like this." I nodded, feeling the stirrings of hope ripple through me. "It won't be. We have to make sure it isn't." Night settled fully, and above us, the first stars appeared, pinpricks of light against the velvet black. They reminded me that even in the deepest darkness, there was light waiting to break through. The echoes of Edenview's past its control, its surveillance would linger, but they would not define our future. As I looked out toward the horizon, I felt a quiet determination rise within me. This community, fractured but not broken, could rise again. We could rebuild Edenview not as a cage, but as a place of trust, resilience, and true connection. The path ahead would be hard, filled with uncertainty and scars. But for the first time since the blackout, I believed in the possibility of dawn. Eli tugged at my sleeve, his eyes wide with curiosity. "Dad, what's next?" I smiled down at him, squeezing his hand gently. "We build," I said simply, "together." And with that, we stepped forward into the unknown, the faint glow of hope, our only guide in the lingering shadows. The air was heavy with the scent of fresh rain and something unfamiliar possibility. Edenview was waking up from a long nightmare, but the ghosts of control still lingered in every shadowed corner and silent street. The smart systems that once dictated every flicker of light and hum of energy were gone, dismantled piece by hands that trembled with a mixture of fear and resolve. I stood in the community center, the meager light from a handful of battery-powered lanterns casting flickering shadows across the faces of my neighbors. Our eyes met in the dimness, searching for a spark of hope, a sign that this new chapter might not be as dark as the one before. "We're not just survivors," I told them, voice steady despite the knot in my stomach. "We're the architects of our future, but that future won't build itself." Rena stepped forward, her fingers brushing over the cold metal of a surveillance camera mounted crookedly on the wall. "It's time to make sure no one watches us anymore," she said softly, pulling the device loose and setting it aside. Around us, others began following suit, disconnecting the last remnants of the control system that had held us captive. The act was symbolic and practical, a declaration that Edenview would no longer be a prison. Outside, Eli darted through the streets, his childish laughter breaking the silence that had settled over our neighborhood for so long. He chased after a stray dog, his small feet padding over cracked pavement bathed in the neon glow of vaporwave skies. The colors seemed almost surreal, a pastel dreamscape that contrasted sharply with the grim reality we had endured. Watching him, I felt a flicker of something I hadn't dared feel in months: joy. But optimism was tempered by reality. Jared, standing near the unlocked gate that had once sealed us in, folded his arms and scanned the perimeter. "No systems, no control," he muttered. "That leaves us vulnerable." What if something worse comes along now? His words struck a chord. The absence of surveillance meant freedom, yes, but also uncertainty. We were stepping into a new order with no blueprint, and every decision carried weighty consequences. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the community, I found myself caught between hope and apprehension. Inside the community center, neighbors formed small groups, voices low but earnest. Plans were sketched on scraps of paper, ideas for watch rotations, neighborhood patrols, and communication networks using old-fashioned radios. We were relearning how to be a community without the omnipresent eye of technology guiding us. I caught Rena's eye. "It won't be easy," she said quietly, "but it has to be done this way. If we don't reclaim control now, it'll be taken from us again." Her words resonated. Edenview's experiment in surveillance and control had failed, but our experiment in freedom was just beginning. I thought about Eli and all the children who deserved to grow up in a place where they could run freely without an unseen puppeteer pulling strings. The night deepened around us, and with it, the weight of responsibility. But beneath that weight was a seed. Fragile, uncertain, but alive. We were no longer prisoners of Edenview's systems. We were its keepers, its guardians, its new order. As I stood at the gate later, the quiet hum of distant city life beyond the walls was a reminder that the world continued outside our bubble, indifferent to our struggles. The darkness was no longer imposed. It was ours to navigate, and for the first time in a long time, I believed we could find our way into the light. "Tomorrow," I whispered to Eli, who had joined me, "we start building something better." He smiled, clutching his toy robot tightly. Together, and with that simple truth, the night no longer felt so dark. But even as hope blossomed, the question lingered: how do we guard our freedom when the threats lurking in the shadows no longer come from machines, but from within? The new order was fragile, and the future uncertain. Yet, it was ours to shape. And that was everything.